Well, hello and welcome. We are live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to the Week in Review, the program where we review some of the big stories to come out of the week. Of course, what's been making headlines, and as always, getting South Africans talking. I am your host, Liesl Wilson. Let's get straight into it. Right, one of our top stories this week, Miss South Africa Ndzanga has been welcomed to her home village in Gavaza outside Tzaneen in the local Nguna tribal authority. Ndzanga has today been welcomed at her home village of Gavaza by local chief Rita Ndzanga. Ndzanga is also going to be conducting some charity work within the area. Perhaps for more on this is cross to SABC News reporter Katlego Nyoni. Katlego, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here. Obviously, there's nostalgia. It's a proud moment for the province, the country at large. You've been following on this two-day tour. Walk us through how her win has inspired not only the people from her village, perhaps also in South Africa.
Absolutely. We have indeed been following the activities since the start of the three-day program to officially welcome Miss South Africa 2022 Ndzanga to her home province of Limpopo. Currently, at the moment, Liesl, we are reporting from a township just outside Tzaneen known as Lenyenye, where a program just concluded where Ndzanga was committing herself to her charity work. Now that program just concluded at Panch Maponya School. Currently, right now, there is a street parade in the streets of Tzaneen. It's going to go to towns like Begasdorp, Nkowankowa, as well as Lenyenye, where we are from. I'm standing, Liesl, to some of the cheering spectators who witnessed this street parade as it made its way through Lenyenye. Thobela le kae re gona ke tla thoma ka lena mama lona ne le tukwa bjane ga le bona Ndzanga mmabontle wa Afrika Borwa wa ga jana a feta mo toropong ya lona.
We were very excited today because since the finals we've been waiting remarkably this date on the calendar, or we're going to go out in the streets and hulu late. So very exciting and encouraging for our young ones.
You are saying Yuli late, but I would like to hear you guys Yuli late. Lena mama le re tlhalositse gore le mone a feta mo ne le tukwa bjane mara
I felt like an ice melting. Even an opportunity, it's for the first time happening in our township. It's an encouragement to our kids. I wish welcome. It's a history in our township. We never had something like this before, and we wish it continue like this. Even next year, we will still want the crown here in Limpopo. That one is from Gavaza, our neighboring township. Next year, Badla from here. It's just that I'm old. I would go for it. I'm over the moon. I don't want to lie. I'm over the moon.
Abutuaka, lena ka le kwa le Yuli late. La khona ho Yuli late.
Ya ka khona.
Maikutlo a lona le bona mosetsana mmabontle o wa rona wa Afrika Borwa o mo botsebotse a feta mo toropong ya lona.
Ke thabile go ri abuti ka o botsa nnete go re ke tlhakade ka selobedi ne ka mkho ke tlhakade gona ntwewe a se ntwele re do e jidiala ka mo province ya borna ya Limpopo like bolobedi ene ngwanyano o khone o ridia re be proud ka ena ene re todula re proud ka ena ka ntwe a dileng.
Mama
Hello.
le tuka bjana
Ke kwa monate o ka nka sepela le ena a ke tsore ke tlhalose gore eng ke rokwa ke feel all right. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Liesl, those are some of the spectators who say they were dazzled when they witnessed that motorcade passing through here. Of course, Liesl, this program will conclude tomorrow. She will still commit to her charity work by visiting another school to hand out sanitary pads. Earlier in the morning, she was welcomed at the Nguna crawl hosted by, of course, the local chief Rita Ndzanga. And we also witnessed and saw Miss South Africa 2022 herself in Ndzanga dancing, wearing her Tsonga attire known as Shibelani. That program will conclude today with a gala dinner. However, tomorrow there is a mini concert with some of the local artists from this area, such as some of the local artists from this area, including Master KG, who will serenade the crowd tomorrow at that function as it concludes. Lizelle?
Katlego, just before I let you go, I mean, the excitement is palpable on my end. I can only imagine what it must be like for you there in the village in Linyeni. I wonder if you could speak to what focus, will be in terms of her legacy, the charity work that she is going to be doing during her reign, how she aims to utilize the platform, perhaps beyond just, for herself, how she's going to inspire others as well.
Well, one of the most key areas of focus, Lizelle, will be education, to also bridge the divide, between those that are struggling to have access to education and those that already have better access to education. She mentioned that, children, particularly learners in poorer villages, may not necessarily be aware of some of the opportunities that, they can follow and pursue. So she was saying that it is her mission to make the schooling environment very conducive in order to allow, for learning to take place in a way that will give the boy child and the girl child an opportunity to excel and identify opportunities that they may venture into, mentioning some of the areas that need to be improved, like service delivery, the right to have access to better ablution facilities at schools, the right to have better infrastructure, access to teaching and learning as well. So that will be her key area of focus during her reign. However, she's saying that she is also willing to work with other stakeholders, outside of the education sector, to essentially improve the status quo in South Africa, to improve the living conditions of many South Africans that find themselves struggling. Lizelle?
Thank you very much for that update, Katlego. I mean, there's lots more in store on your end. We'll be looking forward to those crossings as you update us. Again, Miss South Africa and Ndzanga Ndzanga, as you heard from Katlego, been welcomed to a home village in Gavaza, just outside Tzaneen, for the local Nkuna Tribal Authority, currently in Linyeni. She's going to be focusing on education, access to education, which almost all forms part of equity, equality, and inclusivity at large. I guess this is we all aim to build the country to the best of its ability. Again, Ndzanga Ndzanga is the Miss South Africa reigning for 2022. Lots of excitement, you heard there, as she continues to fly the flag high. Again, a proud moment for all South Africans. On other news now, we're going to take a look at the struggle stalwart Rita Ndzanga, who has finally been laid to rest at the Khamukgopa Cemetery. This is in the North West. Political leaders, government officials, and even locals have bid their last farewell to the stalwart. Northwest Premier Bushi Mape has described struggle stalwart Rita Ndzanga as a beacon of hope during the country's darkest times. Mape was urged with those who were attending the struggle stalwart's funeral to commit in eradicating poverty. He said that the poverty issue is a crisis in the country. Mape says if something is done about poverty levels in the country, the late Ndzanga would be pleased. He was speaking at the funeral service of the late struggle stalwart.
We are sitting on a serious crisis. This issue of poverty, it's a serious crisis. When people say that in South Africa, 30% of people live below food poverty line, it's a crisis. When you mention the statistic, it does not tell you everything. But when you realize that those people go to bed without sufficient food in their stomach to sustain the life of a healthy being, when you know that the children will go to school and at the end of the year will say, Africans in terms of mathematics, they do not perform. The cause of that is no food in the stomach. When we say, no, they can't play soccer, they can't play rugby, they don't have physical strength, the problem is that poverty. We have to do something about that poverty. Ma'am Rita will be very pleased. If you look at the stats today, they say that 48% of women are without a job. That is a calamity. 48%. That is a calamity. So many of us here, Sydney, belonging to the upper middle class, we are very fortunate. That is a calamity that the majority of our people go to bed without the required nutrients in their stomach. And so I want to urge all of us. I saw the report by the organization OECD, Organization of European Cooperation and Development. It says that our economy this year is going to grow at the rate of 1.8%. It says next year it will be 1.3%. That can't be described as pedestrian. That is not going to do anything to growth, serious growth of the economy, of the GDP. That is not going to do anything to unemployment. That is not going to do anything to poverty. We need a more radical stance. We need a more direct, immediate impact on poverty.
Well, in other news, the second leg of the 9th ANC North West Provincial Conference resumes today in Rustenburg. The conference was postponed 2 weeks ago after the election of the 5 officials of the Provincial Executive Committee. On Thursday, group members attempted to interdict the conference at the North West High Court in Maikeng, but their urgent application was dismissed with costs. Perhaps for more on this, we're going to be crossing to our reporter Zebulon Mailne. A very good afternoon to you, Zebulon. Thank you for joining us. Perhaps you can give us an indication as to the delay of the conference. Why was the conference delayed? Also paint the picture of the current situation on your end.
Thank you very much. We are here at Civic Center where some delegates, as you can see behind me here, these are the delegates who have been registered to attend this conference. You'll remember that this conference was postponed 2 weeks ago because of some court interdicts that were taking place there. But now the conference today was supposed to start at 10 o'clock. That it has been pushed to 1 o'clock because of branch members arrived late. You'll remember that this is one of the vast provinces where some members of the ANC are coming as far as Khanyesa, as far as Bray. That's why the conference has been delayed. But as I will allow my colleague Tumelo Setlhabetsi just to show you at the entrance there. These are the members of the ANC trickling in slowly, but we're anticipating that by 1 o'clock the conference will start, where there will be a nomination of 30 additional members of the PEC. You'll remember that the PEC was elected 2 weeks ago before the conference was postponed. As my colleague is showing you there at the entrance center, that's where the police are there searching each and every one of the ANC members coming in. This means that these are the members who already registered, submitted their old accreditation, now having the new accreditation. So that's where there's a searching point, and they are coming in slowly, as I have indicated. But earlier on, we spoke to a secretary of the ANC in the province, Louis Diremelo, who was saying that once everyone has been registered, they will start with the program, starting with a nomination, going to commission, and then giving out the report. In fact, the report will be given out by commissions tomorrow morning, and after that, that's when Treasurer General of the ANC, Paul Mashatile, will be closing the conference.
Folding on your end. Besides the time delays, have there been any other incidences that we need to be aware of? I'm asking this perhaps as we look at what the impact of, this weekend's provincial conference is going to have as we edge closer to the National Elective Conference come December.
Well, in terms of the divisions here, if I heard you correctly, because of this, ANC members are making a little bit of a noise. But if I heard you correctly, when Nonomaloyi accepted the speech 2 weeks ago, he was saying that the first thing first that they are going to do as the PEC is to start on the ground where they are going to unite members of the ANC, because there are a lot of divisions that are taking place within the province. But their task, first thing first, is to unite members of the ANC on the branch level, and then so that when they go to the national conference, they must go as united to make sure that they nominate the leadership that they have decided on.
All right, Zebulon Maine, of course, this is a developing story. Thank you very much for that update. We'll continue to monitor it. Again, it's the second leg of the 9th ANC North West Provincial Conference that is currently taking place at the Civic Centre in Rustenburg. Our reporter Zebulon Maine giving us the latest in terms of what's transpiring there for the weekend. Let's leave the conversation there, take a quick ad break. We'll continue with more news and updates. You're watching The Week in Review. We'll be right back. Right, welcome back. You are watching The Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson. Let's continue now. Economists say inflation is likely to reach a peak and should start moderating on the back of subsiding international food prices. Inflation has been on an upward trajectory for months, driven by high food as well as fuel prices, rather. The volatile rand, however, remains a risk.
The increasing prices of essential goods have left many struggling to make ends meet. But economists say there could be light at the end of a tunnel. Prices could start moderating in the coming months as global commodity prices have been easing and global supply chains are being rebuilt. The price of petrol is expected to decrease by about 228 cents a litre next month, bringing some much-needed relief to hard-pressed motorists.
There's the prospect that our petrol prices are expected to show some decline in the months ahead, and that would be better news for consumers. And thirdly, good crops are expected in South Africa, which could help with food inflation and the food price inflation that we've been experiencing. Now, there are still a number of uncertainties in the inflation outlook. We're not out of the woods yet, but most economists are hoping that inflation in South Africa is either at or close to its peak, and that in the months ahead we can begin to hope that there may be some decline in the rate of inflation.
Recent data from Stats SA shows inflation reached a 13-year high at 7.8% in July. Economists say it's likely times will be hard for some time for indebted consumers, as the Reserve Bank is expected to continue raising interest rates to cap inflation, but with smaller hikes.
Of course, the wild card is the exchange rate of the rand. It is, if something goes wrong, the rand bombs out, and that, of course, will add to the inflationary pressures. But for now, certainly, I think the worst as far as inflation is behind us or pretty close to being behind us. And in these sort of circumstances, the Reserve Bank is likely to continue with the current tightening cycle as far as monetary policy is concerned. So I expect them to increase interest rates again, and perhaps thereafter again and again, but they're likely to reduce or to make that margin of increase a little bit smaller, 25 bips for the next couple of months or the next couple of meetings. Although the next meeting is likely to give another 50 bips or 0.5% increase as far as the interest rates are concerned.
The Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee will meet again next month to decide on interest rates. It's widely expected we'll see a 50 basis points hike. Gloria Safakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, so we now turn our attention to some of the stories that made headlines this week, where on Monday the case of the murdered Hillary Gadi was postponed. Unemployment statistics were released showing a decrease to 33.9%. Now, these figures were released by Stats South Africa, But perhaps for more on these and other stories, we are joined by Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, a political analyst, and Dr. Azar Jamin, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics. A very good afternoon to the both of you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start off with Dr. Azar. We've just seen the unemployment figures released by Stats SA having shown a decrease on unemployment. Ultimately, if you break this down, what does this mean for those who have been searching and looking for employment as we speak?
You know, the unemployment rate officially fell from 34.5% to 33.9%. That still means that more than 1 in every 3 people who's economically active is unemployed. So really, it's a small consolation that at least it went into a declining trend. But the reality is that in absolute terms, the unemployment rate is still extremely high and one of the highest in the world.
Well, speaking on the back of that then, Dr. Azar, the inflation rate figures were released on and obviously currently stands at 7.8%, reaching a 13-year high. Bread, cereals, oils and fats, even fuel and electricity all make up that notable impact on this month's reading. These are also basic food and necessities. And I wonder, in your opinion, how much more can the ordinary South African cut in order to maintain the bare minimum to survive?
It's a very difficult situation, actually, for more than just the ordinary South African, for most South Africans. But one has to recognize that this is a global trend, there are global factors that are contributing towards this surge in inflation, not just domestically oriented factors. Specifically, international oil prices have rocketed this year, and food prices have rocketed. And part of this can be attributed to the disruption to supply chains as a result of lockdowns over the last 2.5 years. But also the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has resulted, especially on the food price front, in shortages that have pushed food prices upwards. On the positive side, the 7.8% figure is still lower than what we see in many leading economies such as the United States, the UK, Europe and the like. And also there is hope that will prove to have been the highest rate of inflation in the current upward trend of inflation, because already we've seen fuel prices starting to decline. There's a further reduction in fuel prices expected next week or the week after next. And then on top of that, food prices have also come off the boil because the Ukraine has been allowed to, by Russia, there was an agreement to allow Ukrainian exports of wheat and sunflower and other critical food commodities to resume. So there is hope that the inflation rate will drop back a little, and many forecasts are suggesting that by the middle of next year, the latter part of next year, we are likely to see inflation back within the 3 to 6% inflation target of the Reserve Bank. But you're quite right, notwithstanding that, it's still very tough going for the average consumer, because most wage increases have been hovering at around 5-6%, and barely keeping pace with the increases in fuel and food prices. There are, of course, some domestic reasons for high inflation, including electricity and water tariffs that have been, property rates that keep being pushed up by municipalities at rates well in excess of inflation. But on the whole, I think the inflationary picture in South Africa is not as bad as it is in many countries of the world, partly because there isn't that huge level of demand that you have seen in the likes of the United States as that economy has come out of lockdown, where people have been traveling like crazy and airfares and car prices have rocketed as a consequence.
Dr. Harvey, Doctor, sorry, let me bring Dr. Harvey into the conversation. Dr. Jamina, just obviously looking at political economy. We've now heard the stats and figures from Dr. Jamin. We're also looking at the national shutdown that occurred this week. We saw SAFTU and COSATU affiliated members having taken to the streets. The demands of SAFTU, including the raising of a national minimum wage to 72 Rand an hour. There were calls for basic income grant of about 1,500 Rand, as well as a cap on the fuel price and interest rate hikes. Now, in an economy that is not doing as well, it's experiencing some tough, scenarios as we're speaking. Do you think that these demands can be realized at this point? How would you weigh in on this?
You mean the wage demands?
Yes, absolutely. Perhaps just on the back of some of the other, factors that have contributed to the dire economic situation we're experiencing in the country right now.
Yeah. No, the wage demands are fully justified. I did a column in the News 24 this morning, but Jardine must be very careful when he says to you that we are not so bad off with the inflation rate compared to other countries. I think it's a false analogy to begin with to talk about other countries. An inflation rate and its impact on people, especially the working class majority, has to be looked at in terms of where the situation is, the cost of living, standards of living, wages, a whole variable range of factors have to be taken. I think, him talking about being not so bad compared to is really a cold, in fact, for me, highly problematic. But I want to address your question regarding the SAFTU and COSATU strike. You'll see the heart of that strike. It was a socio-economic and, in fact, political strike because it drew attention to the necessity for the ANC government to intervene. It revolved around, the heart of it was the socio-economic crisis, the cost of living, petrol, etc., etc. And what Dr. Jardine was trying to do, besides the question of the false analogy it draws between us and other countries' inflation rates, is to say to us, how does the working class and poor recover? You see, when wage increases does not keep pace with the rate of inflation, what do you have effectively? You have a steady decline in the standards of living. Now, already inherited from the apartheid past, the black working class majority had low standards of living. Even that's why the working poor concept arises from the academics, even for those who work. So you must be very careful, when you address these questions. And in fact, I fully supported the strike in the column this morning that SAFTU. And bear in mind, very importantly, which you have not and analysts have not, there are two major constraints that strike faced. Number one, the railway lines are not working. It's the major form of transport of the black working class. Number two, buses arrived late, and you can see what's been happening in SAFTU. The NUMSA implosion, they never threw their weight really behind this. So when you take all these factors into account, that thing was a very successful strike as far as I'm concerned. But key and critical, and this is what I'm worried about. I heard Dr. Jardine even during the week. I heard him out of concern, him saying that, the food manufacturers and retailers will not be interested in dropping prices, etc. But that's the problem. The ANC government has to, the demand that the unions are putting, they must meet with the food manufacturers and retailers to discuss not just a freezing of prices, but a drop in especially the most important food items. This is not the language he speaks. He rather tells us that it's very unlikely that you're going to have these people being willing to learn to listen to the need to drop prices considerably. That is the only thing that's going to make a difference here, because primarily the strike revolved around the cost of living, of which food, fuel, and transport costs are the key elements.
Okay, so Dr. Harvey, perhaps before we get a response from Dr. Azar, just in relation to what you've echoed, we also can't ignore the systemic issues, the ideological debates that obviously form part of the discussions that are ongoing as we look at ways to recover. In the week, both COSATU also raised problems around the cost of living, as you alluded to, the increasing of food and petrol and unemployment as well. And the minister said that dealing with these issues was dependent on the economy turning around. They subsequently handed over a memorandum to the minister in the presidency, Mondi Gungubele. And I mean, it's not the first time that a memorandum has been handed over, and yet not much has changed. I wonder how you would weigh in on that as we look at navigating the steps ahead. Dr. Harvey, if you can hear me, that question was just, that was for you as well, yeah.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm not quite sure I understood what your question was.
Oh, it was actually for Dr. Harvey. It was just before we get back to the responses that he put forth. Dr. Harvey, if you can hear me, we've obviously, in the week, COSATU raised problems around the cost of living, the increasing food of price, petrol and unemployment, which you've just now re-echoed. And yes. I wonder, as that memorandum was handed over to the minister in the presidency, I mean, the minister in the presidency, Mondi Gugubele, did say that the issues that have come forth were dependent on the economy turning around. This memorandum, having been handed over this week, is not the first time that a memorandum has been handed over, and yet not much has been done, perhaps, to change the overall situation. So I wonder how you would weigh in on that as we navigate the steps ahead post the strike this week.
Yeah, no, thanks for that important question at that. Really, to be honest with you, and not just being unduly pessimistic, I don't foresee much being done by the presidency and the government, to address the demands of because in fact you have to ask yourself, how is it that the ANC government did nothing? You see, they did nothing. All along we were sitting with this major crisis, food crisis, especially after not just COVID, but the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Exploded food prices. The impact was clear, it was massive. And the ANC government obviously could see this. It did nothing. That is precisely why the strike takes place. Because COSATU and SAFTU is seeing nothing is being done. The members are being affected, and hence the strike was taken. The strike was not taken lightly. But because of these, I don't foresee, to be honest with you, because they did nothing before the strike. Whether the strike will cause them to awaken to how deep this crisis is, especially, I mean, Liesl, this is terrible. Children are going to bed hungry, malnutrition. Yes. I mean, over 10 million people hungry. This country is in a mess. And what did the ANC government do all along? Nothing. They attempted to assist perhaps with a stress relief grant and so on. But you can see what's emerging now very strongly from the strike is a basic income grant. That is what is going to probably make a big difference. Plus, importantly, very importantly, and I hear talks about, inflation decreasing and the price of foodstuffs also will probably decrease, petrol. But the ANC government, I believe, has to call urgent meetings and the relevant ministries with the food manufacturers and retailers to address. I mean, it's been terrible what's been happening, especially since February when the Russian invasion of Ukraine occurred. It's just been, steadily ongoing increases, which has really affected people seriously. The ANC government has to intervene. That is what SAFTU and COSATU meant when they talked about an intervention. I don't know. I'm not very optimistic, honestly, that they will make such an intervention, which is the only thing that is going to help here probably.
So on the back of the article you penned, you raised the issue that unions should take a strong stance in wage negotiations in a country like South Africa, where people have had to take salary cuts and have also had no salary increases, particularly following the COVID-19 pandemic. And I wonder how you would weigh in on that. How would that ultimately become possible then?
Well, no, are you putting that question to me?
Yes, that's still for you, Dr. Harvey. I'm going to bring Dr. Azar back into the convo after this.
No, I think it's important, to the extent that it's possible and in fact necessary. That's the thing also. I think we stricken too much with economic neoliberal orthodoxy, that looks at the whole range of variables, not most importantly, the standard of living, the wages, income, etc., of working class majority. That is where I believe that something can be done and should be done to address that. It's a very tough economic situation. We all know about that. But I believe it's going to get worse. And so that part of turning things around economically is a more redistributional strategy and less of what have we seen? We've seen austerity measures by the ANC government for the past year to two. That needs to be turned around. You're not going to get this economy turning around unless you turn away from the austerity neoliberal measures that the ANC government has imposed.
Dr. Azar, on the back of what Dr. Ibrahim has just mentioned, I wonder if you could weigh in very quickly on how policy is ultimately affecting the marginalized, perhaps also its impact on South Africa as we tackle triple threats of poverty, unemployment, inequality. I mean, these all have systemic issues that sort of impact the contemporary lived reality of South Africans as we're speaking.
What you're asking me is actually one needs a whole hour to talk about. But I think at the source of the problem of inequality in South Africa is the inequality in educational outcomes, which is depriving so many South Africans of the ability to add value in such a way as to command a decent job and to contribute to add value to the economy. And they stay unemployed as a consequence, and so inequality simply is exacerbated. To try and rectify these by throwing money at the problem is really it's not a sustainable solution. Yes, you can introduce a basic income grant, but if you introduce it at 1,500 Rand per month for all adult South Africans, very quickly the government will be bankrupt. The Rand will collapse. Inflation will rise not to 7.8%, but to 780%. The poor will suffer even more than far more than they are doing at present. To try and artificially reduce prices means that the government has to step in to provide subsidies to producers so that they will continue supplying those goods. Otherwise, they will stop supplying them, and people won't be able to find basic foodstuffs products to purchase. One has to think through many of the fairly, seductive, easy ways out of this problem.
Dr. Azar, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Harvey, if you're still there, please do hang on. I want to continue the conversation with you. Dr. Azar, Thank you very much for joining us, just weighing in on some of the contributing factors, perhaps both on a micro and macro level that continue to impact high food and gasoline prices, perhaps also how to navigate the way forward for South Africa. Now, Dr. Harvey, just quickly in conclusion, I want to look at other stories that have made headlines this week. And moving away from some of the other... And looking at some of the other stories this week, I mean, we saw the MEC of Health criticized for the video that went viral. This is the MEC of Health in Limpopo, Dr. Poppy Ramatuba. Issues of cross-border healthcare agreements coming into play, which obviously has arisen, perhaps even from the dawn of our democracy. We're looking at the issue of leadership. We're looking at the issues of accountability, conduct, again, cross-border healthcare, and consequence management. How would you weigh in on what transpired this week in terms of that video that surfaced?
No, really, it's scandalous, I mean, you've seen social media and the mainstream media's response. It's really, but it's part of what's been happening. You mustn't look at it in isolation. This ANC government and the measures they've put in place, legal, the home affairs, what they're doing, really, they are creating such a massive problem. Despite the denials to the contrary, we have a serious problem, and the legislation they've put through is not going to assist anything. Let me tell you, South Africa, had it not gone the route that it did, had enough resources, the most powerful, the powerhouse of production in not just South Africa, Southern Africa, and further afield. It's what has happened to this country post-1994 with the neoliberalism, that it becomes now such a big thing, but it's a major problem because it flies in the face of the Constitution. What that doctor did was unpardonable. I agree with those people who are calling for a dismissal. But in fact, a lot of these things, xenophobic utterances, and Becky and others denying that the ANC is xenophobic and that we have xenophobic policies, and it is there. And I believe it's going to worsen the situation, As far as I'm concerned, if indeed there are people in Zimbabwe or elsewhere who feel that things are very bad out there and they might get a better service, in one of the neighboring provinces or areas, it shouldn't happen. Obviously, one is presuming that there's people have entered the country legally, etc. But, to insist that only people from South Africa be treated, it also draws attention to the neoliberal budgetary constraints. That is the reason why. That is the reason why which is in fact feeding the xenophobia. You see, they have inadequate budgets to meet these expenses and dealing with people. I mean, this is health issues. Why do you want to turn people away who are needy and sick, and needs attention? And a couple of doctors, you can see the health advocacy group or something also came out slamming her and siding with and agreeing that what she said was unpardonable, In fact, some people calling for a resignation. But don't look at it in isolation. A lot of things have been happening by this ANC government around this xenophobic thing. And but it's really very unfortunate, And I think that that doctor might be regretful now when you look at the massive reaction that there's been, against what she has said.
Thank you very much for weighing in and being part of this discussion. Again, top political stories being, looking at those top political stories of the week. Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, political analyst, as well as Dr. Azar Jamin, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics, weighing in on some of those top stories. We'll leave the conversation there. Take a quick ad break. We'll continue with more on the other side. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. The Week in Review continues. Delegates at the PAC conference at Seshego Polokwane have called for unity. It comes after the gathering descended into chaos yesterday. The conference is expected to elect the National Executive Council and discuss policies. Now, the party says that it will use the conference to focus on issues of land, unemployment, and migration. Our reporter Mahlako Komane Elion spoke to party president Mzwanele Nyotso.
This is a Congress. This is not a meeting. This is an elective Congress called by the Constitution of the PAC with its prescriptions that how the Congress is convened. So it is not a rally. It is not a meeting. You can't just get inside, get every Jack and Jill come inside and sing and wants to be accredited, thus undermining the very same constitution of the very same PAC. So those were people who are not registered but wants to be part of the Congress through the back door. And unfortunately, we will never allow that one.
And how were you able to deal with that yesterday? Because we were told by the chairperson of the province that it was a rent-a-crowd situation.
As a result, I did not see it, which means the security and them as leaders of provinces dealt with it far away from me. I did not even see it. I only saw it on television. If I had no television, I would not even know, because it was a matter that happened far away from where I was.
Okay, maybe let's talk about the party. This is, a conference. It's elective. In terms of the future of the PAC, what are you hoping is going to take place? Are we going to see a stronger PAC? I mean, we've been seeing what has been happening at the polls in terms of the electorate. As the party going forward, what are you going to ensure, or what are you hoping is going to take place?
Now, remember, from last year in the local government elections, we saw a party that was growing. We saw a party that was having numbers. We saw a united PAC, one PAC, and we saw a leadership that is not questionable. Nobody now ask a question that you've been asking as the media: which PAC are you representing? Which president are you following? We saw that party. Hence, the PAC received 23 councillors in the last election, despite the fact that we registered only 5 minutes before the closing time of elections. Now going forward, this is a party growing. Going forward, this is a united PAC Going forward, this is the PAC that is going to fight for the return of the land to its rightful owners. Going forward, this is the party that must liberate the people of Azania, because for the past 28 years we've been betrayed. We've been in this country, we've been told that we are free, and yet we've been living in squalor, we've been living in poverty situations. So we want that PAC that must unite and fight for the African people. That PAC that must unite and be at the center of politics, where it belongs.
And you feel that you've done enough in terms of your campaign? I know that you are also going up against Dr. Zidlunga Mantashe, your DP.
No, I did not even campaign. There was no need. I could not campaign. A president doesn't campaign. A president just goes to do its job. And then the branches of the PAC decide that you are doing something, they must remove you or they must change you. So I never campaigned. I don't even know what you are talking about. Even the deputy president that you are telling me about never said to me he is challenging me or he is campaigning. I'm sure you were here, we were laughing yesterday together. So I did not know what you are talking about. There was no way I could campaign. The branches of the PAC must tell us here if we have performed or not. Then if we have not performed, they must change us. This is their PAC. This is not my PAC. We don't do this thing in the PAC of going out there and say, I'm ready to lead. Please elect me. No, we don't do that. The branches must say you are ready to lead. So if the branches feel I've failed, they must change me. I won't complain. I was born PAC, I'm a PAC member, and I was not born president.
Right, another story making headlines this weekend. The Comrades Marathon is a day away. Runners are getting geared up for the ultra marathon experience. More than 14,000 runners will line up at the start at the Pietermaritzburg City Hall, where the race will begin at 5:30 a.m. and 12 hours later at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban, where after a 2-year hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the race has returned with much fanfare. Perhaps for more on this, we will cross to our reporter, Vusi Kumalo. A very good afternoon to you, Vusi. Let's talk us through the systems and mechanisms that have been put in place. Is it all systems go with regards to the preparations for the race? What is transpiring on your end?
Yes, indeed, more than 14,000 runners or athletes have already qualified to take part in this year's Comrades Marathon. It's the 95th one, or the 47th down run being held by David Khatebe, a record that he broke in 2016. David Khatebe, who sauntered to finish in grand style. With me are some of the athletes coming all the way from Gauteng. I must say that Gauteng, as usual, this time around, they've provided 6,000 athletes all the way from Gauteng as compared to KwaZulu-Natal's 3,000 runners who have qualified for this year's 95th Comrades Marathon. Let me talk to one of the guests now, Nompumelelo Magwaza, also coming all the way from Gauteng. Just tell us about your preparations, Sisi. We know that you'll be running the Comrades Marathon for the first time.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'll be running Comrades Marathon for the first time. We started training for the Comrades, I think, last year because we didn't know the date. That's going to be in August. So we've been training for the past 7 months. And I'm hoping that everyone who's going to be taking part in the race is ready for it tomorrow. And I'm really excited to, because it's my first time.
Are the nerves killing you?
Yes, the nerves are killing me. As you can see, the crowd around us, everyone is nervous, but we are hoping that we'll be at Moses Mabhida on the right time and still alive.
Are you ready though?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
That's Nompumelelo Magwaza. Let us now shift our focus to Lebo Motato. Just tell us about your preparations. So far I can see that your team is already chanting slogans and also very happy to be here.
Very, very happy. The preparations were very tough, training throughout winter, but we are very confident. We brought 118 runners from Fat Cats Athletics Club across the country, so we are very confident of tomorrow.
So how many comrades have you done?
Myself, it's 3 comrades. I'm going for my 4th and hoping to finish it strong as well.
Are we going to see the same electric atmosphere being paraded tomorrow from your group members?
Most definitely. Our support is one of the best support clubs in the races along the route. So we are very ready. The vibe will be amazing. It will be lit. So it will be a sea of red all across the whole route from the start until the finish.
Okay, yes, there you have it. The runners are saying that they are ready for tomorrow's 95th Comrades Marathon, set to take place from 5:30 early in the morning, from all the way from Peter Marisbeck to Durban at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. That's the finish line tomorrow at Moses Mabhida Stadium. As you can see and also hear, the mood is palpable outside the venue, the ICC. That is, the runners are collecting their race packs down here in Durban as they are chanting and doing all that, getting themselves ready for tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Vusi, for that update. Vusi Kumalo talking to us about the Comrades Marathon, set to take place tomorrow in KZN. Definitely a story we'll be monitoring here on the SABC, returning after two-year hiatus post-COVID-19. It seems all systems go ahead of that race. We'll leave the conversation there, leave the show there today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tomorrow we take a look at the week ahead. From myself, Liesl Wilson, and the team. Until then, it's goodbye for now.